G'day, Aisha Mahara here. Borderlines cannot and will not love you. This is the topic of this video. They do not love, they do not attach, they cannot love you, and they will not love you. People with BPD, they mess with you, and they're not attaching. They get lost in you. They lose themselves in you. There's no boundary. There's no ego boundary between self and other. So they're really focused on you because they're looking for identity through you. This is a repetition compulsion from the lost self, from the fragmented, split off from child state of ego by the age of 2 with your emotional arrested development. So this isn't something they're doing on purpose or in a calculating way or anything like that at all. People with BPD simply do not know their own identity or their own self. They do not know where they end and you begin. So it's really unfortunate, tragic, and sad for so many people. This is the agony. If you're dating somebody with BPD right now, I hope you come across this video because you might really want to take it seriously and think about it. And if you've been with somebody with BPD for a while and it's been pretty rocky, just know you need to extricate yourself because they need years of therapy because they don't know who they are. And people with BPD do not see you. They see you as object other, parent representation. Whenever they're triggered, and they rarely will see you in between the vacillations and the splitting and the mood shifts and the approach avoidance conflict and the push-pull and the get away closer because they're so lost inside of a self without a self. Not understand and drowning in emotions and not understanding what the emotional triggers are, where they go back, what's driving their behavior. They really don't understand. And even when they get some clear understanding up here, it takes years to put it into the emotional landscape and to really, truly grow. And how can I be so sure? Let's get into it. This disorganized attachment style of those with borderline personality is chaotic and characterized by rapid vacillations between closeness and extreme distance, which creates and sustains unstable and chaotic, not only relationships, but relating from the very get-go. So these vacillations, it's the splitting cycle. It's the idealization to devaluation. Idealization to devaluation. It's like closer, and then engulfment fear, and then, gotta get space and distance. And often that's when they just leave, back out of relationships, ghost people, or that's more the quiet BPD, could be the acting out. But the acting out borderline will start a fight, create conflict and chaos to push you away. So it's that push-pull, right? Pull, come closer, push, get away. Pull, come closer is when somebody with BPD is really, they can try. They really want to be loved. They really want to have relationships, but they cannot and they will not be able to love you because they can't love themselves and they don't know who they are. But so what happens is the pull, the idealization, the mirroring in the beginning, the honeymoon phase, the pull, which is also steeped in codependency for people with BPD as well as this disorganized attachment and their adverse childhood experience. They arrested development at the age of 2. They have not gone on to learn how to move in and move out with people, to be close and then to be distant, there's no object constancy, no object permanence. So when you walk out the door, or for some people with BPD, especially untreated, when you just give your attention to someone else or something else, they feel abandoned, whether they realize it or not. So they're always vacillating between when they can get back to idealization and devaluation. What happens there? In idealization, they are in the approach avoidance conflict, the pulling you in, the approaching you, and then when you get close, they feel totally engulfed. And when they feel engulfed, then they feel like you're controlling them and they feel out of control, and anxiety, if it's not felt, it's certainly experienced, and most people with BPD really feel this anxiety and they don't know how to cope with it. And they think you're causing it and you're not. It's within them. So then the next thing you know, they'll do something, they need to get away from the fear of engulfment. And then in the approach avoidance, so in the avoidance half, they get away from the engulfment, take space, or they might ghost you, or it's on and off again. And the next thing you know, you're getting a Hoover, or maybe, you come home, or you've had 5,000 texts in the last couple hours because they were quiet for a couple hours, or you had a bunch of texts yelling at you for half the day. Because once they get out of the engulfment fear, they can vacillate really rapidly between engulfment fear, push away, right? And then, feeling abandoned, as if you abandoned them. But that's not what happened, because these are the repetition compulsions from early childhood and from insecure attachment, which with BPD is more appropriate to, it really is disorganized attachment, which is more on the anxious side of attachment than avoidant. So they'll be feeling the fear of abandonment then. They want to pull you back in. Oh, everything's going to be okay. I won't do this again. I'm sorry for that. I'll go to therapy. I'll do this. I'll do that. No, that's like what happened in the beginning, only it's not as idealizing. It's not a honeymoon phase, but it's still that bargain. It's still the borderline siren song. It's way too good to be true. And these are the brass tack facts of borderline personality. And I always specify in my videos, I've been talking about this online for almost 30 years now. And I have several other videos that touch on this subject or actually go in depth into this subject. Borderlines cannot and will not and have never loved you. And then I would say until and unless significant treatment, right? Well, that's not necessarily a saving grace, because until and unless significant treatment is a very vague way that I've been saying, like what is significant treatment? Okay, so that varies for different people. But it's not going to be 2 years, not going to be 3 years, not going to be DBT alone because it's not a recovery modality. It's not going to be 5 years of therapy either. In more people than not's case, it's going to be more like 8 to 16 years. And why is that? Even today, the deeper work and someone to work with, to do that deeper work with people with BPD is harder and harder to find because of the number of clinicians that don't want to work with them, plus the ones that do work with them or specialize in this area, as I specialize in this area, they are pretty busy, or people with BPD don't have the money to get the therapy they need. But it's also, as somebody who's been there to the end of the path and the road of what full BPD recovery really means, and was assessed as such, didn't just make that up and declare myself fully recovered. But that is the deeper work that gets into finding the lost self. Because that fragmentation in BPD is a fragmented, split off child ego state. Gone. And what rises at the age of 2 with that arrested emotional development, that person who was in there ceases emotionally to grow or psychologically to grow. And what happens is they get a year older and they can get more intelligent and they often have really effective IQ. But they're missing EQ, emotional intelligence, social skills. They don't know how to bond. They don't know how to attach. In fact, it triggers them, and it brings severe fear and severe either engulfment, fear of engulfment, feelings of engulfment, or feelings of abandonment. And there's nothing in between. It's that black and white. It's the approach, avoidance, conflict. Disorganized attachment, it doesn't matter how much they try or how much they promise. People with borderline personality cannot and will not love you. And they have not loved you. You might have been in a relationship for a lot of years and you might really think that's love. I mean, the last partner I had, a year and a half ago, for 4 years, was a person with quiet BPD. And I really thought that we had love in that relationship. But in retrospect, no. There was all of the signs that for some reason I wasn't seeing because I wasn't having a codependent response to when they would withdraw and when I wouldn't hear from them for days or weeks or a month or two at a time because I would go on with my life. And we didn't live together, but we were in a relationship that I thought was a committed relationship. But the point is, they cannot and will not and have not ever loved you. And that's really difficult for people to hear because you want to rationalize 6 ways to Sunday, but the person I'm with loves me and I know they love me. And Or you're still hoping they can love you again, but they didn't ever really love you in the first place because they can't attach, they can't bond. All they can do is sort of like, it's an unhealthy bond, and it's not even a bond. So people with BPD cannot, will not, and have not ever loved you in significant other relationships, for sure. And it's very complicated in families of origin and with parents as well, because they may feel so much love, but it can evaporate in a heartbeat. Borderline push-pull. Get away closer. I hate you, don't leave me. And also, I did a video on the reality of these splitting cycles and how they will speed up over time, if not really quickly, like when you're dating or you've just been in a relationship for a short period of time or a year or whatever the case. They aren't loving you. They can't love you. They haven't been loving you. They can't love you, and they will not love you. They don't have a self from which to love you. They don't love self because they don't know self. Unstable sense of identity is the descriptor, but the reality under that is they really don't know who they are. So there are a lot of people with BPD, they've had 3 years, 5 years, 6, maybe even 7 years of treatment, but they stop short and they haven't done the rest of the work in a psychodynamic modality of therapy. And without doing that work that I did 3 decades ago plus, they will not find the self. They will not learn how to soothe themselves emotionally, psychologically. They will not increase their emotional intelligence, but many of them walk around with 5 years, 5.5, 6 years worth of treatment off and on. They will really think a lot up here that they're on their way. They're so close to recovery, but their behavior doesn't indicate it at all. And many of them are aware of the fact that they can't love, they won't love, they haven't loved anybody. They get this approach avoidance thing going. It's like push-pull, and it's that engulfment. So this is why so many people also report that when they get ghosted, or some people use the term discarded, but man, the day before, the night before, it was fabulous. We were so close. Everything was great. Or maybe a week before even, or 4 days before. And then all of a sudden, they were just gone. This ghosted, just discarded. Because when it's good, they don't know how to take that in. There's no container of self in people with BPD. And that container of self can't really be rebuilt, restructured, unless and until people with BPD go through the long haul of what recovery really means. And the long haul is more than 3 to 5 to 7 years of on and off and switching modalities and that type of thing. So make no mistake about it. As somebody who had BPD and I am fully recovered, I'm in a great relationship now. I've had healthy relationships along the way. Last person I was with was a quiet borderline. I was with a quiet borderline back in the 80s when I had BPD. I had codependency, still have a little bit, but nothing like I used to. I wasn't even responding to my last quiet BPD ex. When she would be taking leave, I just thought, I didn't think anything of it actually. I wasn't even thinking about it. She would just not reply, or she might say something in a text that was kind of weird, and I would just go on with my life until next time. And then if we got together, she'd cancel plans, etc. But the thing is, so they don't really love you. They want to. They try to, but they can't. And they won't, and they never have. And it is the insecure attachment with BPD that is from the fragmented ego of an evacuated, otherwise burgeoning authentic self at the arrested emotional development around the age of 2 or by the age of 2. The default self rises, and the authentic self that was there just split off from. Not like alters or anything like that, like DID, no. But split off from and lost. So they have no object constancy, no object permanence. Approach avoidance conflict, the splitting, everything is black and white. In the middle of approach avoidance or engulfment, fear of engulfment, fear of abandonment, there's nothing in the middle. It's one or the other. Vacillating, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So people who are still hoping or believe that this person with BPD really loved you in the idealization and mirroring phase, the people pleasing through their codependency as well. There's some people call love bombing, which is not appropriate for people with BPD. It's not what they're doing at all. But the point is, they never did love you. They don't love you now. They cannot love you, and they will not love you. And I believe now the only accurate thing to say to people on this topic, they cannot, will not, and have not loved you. They can't or will not love until they do the deeper work. That's the longer extended period in psychodynamic therapy of really truly knowing the self in an emotional landscape and reparenting that self in therapy, which is different than inner child healing for people with codependency. It's a much more complicated process. And so without that, then significant treatment, 5 years, 7 years, it doesn't matter. Because until they get down into the emotional landscape and under what's driving this disorganized attachment, this approach avoidance, this push-pull, this get away closer, I hate you, don't leave me, they're not going to understand emotionally what's still driving that. So they have not loved you, they cannot love you, and they will not love you. And it takes full recovery. And I know that because, I'm in a great relationship now. I've had a few healthy ones along the way and a few clunkers. I know, I've been able to love basically since I recovered, but, a year or so after that. But at that time of my recovery, I met the person that was my first love, even though I had a relationship for 13 years prior to that. Because when you find yourself again and you get that, you internalize the self again because it's all over the place and non-existent really and not known, then and only then can you learn how to truly soothe yourself in an emotional way, in a psychological way. Then and only then can you know yourself. And it takes self-cohesion and self-coherence to be able to form object relations, to be able to see people for who they are as opposed to, object representation of this parent or the other parent or parent not had. So they haven't loved you. They cannot and will not love you. And that's the really harsh truth about borderline personality, which is a response to adverse childhood experience. Some people keep wanting to say personality disorder, but the work of the ICD-11 and what's coming and the work around the world outside of North American psychiatry is about to blow the personality disorder known as BPD out of the water. So people who are still talking about it in those old ways, there's tons of people, there's tons of professionals who are too, but that's North American centric. So unfortunately, the really bad news is these people need tremendous amounts of therapy and they need to stick with it and be really committed. And if you're already in a relationship, you already had a relationship, it's on, it's off, and you're trying to rescue and fix, and then, and you're enabling them, and you want to get them into therapy so it can be okay. No, it doesn't work because it takes 8 to 16 years minimum and more towards the outer edge of that to go do that deeper work, to really build back a self that is banished with the arrested emotional development at the age of 2. So they cannot, will not, and have not loved you. And there's nothing you can do to rush them into therapy, or a year of DBT isn't going to change that, or 2 years of DBT isn't going to change that, or 5 years of therapy, internal family systems, transference-focused psychotherapy. It's not going to happen that quickly. There's so much other work that needs to be done. And then there's still the defense mechanisms for people with BPD, which can be elaborate, but not like narcissistic personality disorder. They are narcissistic infantile defenses that even with the best of intellect and awareness up here, people have had a lot of treatment from BPD, they can't put it together with the emotional landscape. They can't stop the self-absorption. They can't stop drawing everything back to themselves or feeling engulfed or feeling abandoned and taking everything personally. So this isn't the good news, but this is the absolute truth about borderline personality. They haven't loved you, they cannot love you, and they will not love you. And it takes really a full recovery. Really that person knowing self and the inner child, the lost, fragmented from ego state of the inner child needs to be found, needs to be upload a lot of pain, needs to be nurtured, and it takes therapy to do this. I couldn't have done it by myself. And it's a very long and it can be arduous and slow process. And a lot of people with BPD won't make it through that process because it's confronting so many things. And I can say much more about that, and I will. But just know, this is going to be a video probably that a lot of people don't like, but it's the truth. And the truth will set you free. When you stop having false hope, rationalizations, being stuck in the many blocks and sort of areas of codependency that people get stuck in with false hope and all kinds of other things. And this is really the way it is. And so I don't want to say until and unless significant treatment, because that does not bring, it could bring somebody, but not most people with BPD. It's still like about an 8 to 10 to 12 to 16 year process. And they really have to go deep. This work is deep. This work is difficult. This work is very daunting. I've been through it. I recovered. It is extremely difficult to go through. It's sort of like you are going back to reverse, in a way, the loss of self to the arrested emotional development. And then you have to deal with the false self aspect. It is really complicated stuff, but I can talk a lot more about that. So I hope this video, though it's sobering, I hope it will help you to think about this. And if you have codependency, or you're in a relationship, or you're dating somebody right now with BPD, just know that unless and until they get to full recovery, which is possible, especially in psychodynamic modalities, but takes so long, and people don't stick with it long enough, or they'll go and they'll stop, and they'll go and they'll stop. When I got to that deeper work, I was in that work for like 3.5 years, no breaks. 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. It was so intense, and that's what it takes to get through finding the self, learning how to soothe oneself. You got to have a self object. You got to know self before you can know object other and see the person who's really in front of you instead of seeing them as mom or dad. So it's sobering, but I hope that it might help some people to be set free today from false hope and or whatever else could be blocking you with codependency. And feeling sorry for them, empathy is understandable. Compassion is a wonderful thing. But feeling sorry for them is wasted energy. You can't fix them. You can't change them. You can't rescue them. It's not their fault they have BPD, but it is now their responsibility to go and get and stay with extended long-term treatment to be able to find that self, reparent that self, learn how to self-nurture, have self-cohesion and self-coherence from which to relate to other, have ego boundaries, because they have no ego boundaries between where they end and you begin. They enmesh, they merge. People with BPD have not, in significant other relationships, have not loved you, cannot love you, and will not love you unless they are healed. And that healing doesn't come with diminishment of traits that are human traits in the first place. It is more measurable when somebody, like I did, gets into the emotional landscape and does that really hard work. So I don't want to go on, but that's just a sobering truth about people with BPD. It's disorganized attachment, and they have insecure attachment in childhood, whether it's perceived or actual. And Alan M. Shore talks about affect synchrony, and the mirroring and the attunement is not there between mother and child for whatever reasons. And then other things can happen. These people don't know who they are. How can they possibly see when they can't see themselves? Take care.